Arman Khan was a man of simplicity, gentle in nature, soft-spoken, and endlessly loyal. He came from a humble village, raised with strong values of love, respect, and sacrifice. When he married Zoya Sheikh, a bright and beautiful woman from the city, he thought he had found his forever. Zoya was everything Arman had ever prayed for, elegant, educated, and ambitious. She came into his life like a dream, and for a while that dream felt real. Their wedding was modest but filled with love, and the village had never seen Arman smile as much as he did that day. But dreams, as Arman would come to learn, don't always last. Shortly after the wedding, Arman made the painful decision to leave for Dubai to earn a better living. He had only one goal: to give Zoya the life she deserved. He promised her a future of comfort, of travel, of freedom. With tears in her eyes, Zoya had waved goodbye at the airport. But what Arman didn't know was that behind those tears was a heart already drifting elsewhere. The hidden truth: while Arman was working 16-hour shifts under the scorching Middle Eastern sun, Zoya had begun to change. At first, it was small: missed calls, delayed replies, distant conversations. Arman thought she was just adjusting to being alone. But back home, Zoya had met someone. Rian, a friend from her college days. He was flashy, smooth-talking, and always around. What started as casual conversations soon turned into secret meetings, then into something much darker. Zoya fell for Rian's charm, the way he made her feel young, wild, free, something she claimed Arman's life of sacrifice couldn't give her. And while Arman sent money every month without fail, saving every dirham, denying himself even the smallest pleasures, Zoya was spending that very money on vacations, shopping, and nights out with the man Arman didn't even know existed, the bear. Discovery. 3 years passed. Arman had planned to surprise her. He saved enough to buy a small flat back home. He dreamed of coming back, of holding Zoya in his arms, of seeing the joy in her eyes when he said, "We finally have our own home." But what waited for him was not joy. It was silence. When he arrived unannounced at their rented apartment, the door was locked. The neighbors looked at him with pity. "She left," one said. "She doesn't live here anymore. She moved in with someone else last year." Confused, heart pounding, Arman spent days searching, and then one day he saw her, walking out of a cafe hand in hand with Rian. She looked happy, radiant, and unbothered, as if their marriage never existed. He didn't confront her that day. Instead, he walked away, broken, shattered, hollow. Confrontation and collapse. Later that week, Zoya returned to meet him, perhaps out of guilt, or maybe curiosity. Arman sat quietly, tears in his eyes, and asked only one question: "Why?" Zoya, with a cold smile, replied, "Because I wanted more. And you were too simple for me. I was never meant for a man like you." That moment changed Arman forever. He filed for divorce. He said nothing cruel, made no scene, just a simple signature on paper that marked the end of a one-sided love story. Life after love. Zoya moved in with Rian, but the fairy tale she imagined quickly cracked. Rian was not the loving partner she thought he was. With time, he began to lose interest. He didn't want commitment. He only wanted thrill. And once the thrill was gone, so was he. He cheated on Zoya, used her, and left her alone, broken, and with nothing. As the months turned to years, Zoya found herself isolated. Her family had turned their backs. The respect she once had was gone. The money, the glamour, the attention, it had all vanished. All she had left were memories and regrets. Every night she scrolled through old photos of Arman, the man who had loved her truly, purely, the man she had betrayed. But by then, it was too late. Arman's redemption. Arman, meanwhile, moved far away. He joined a humanitarian organization. He helped orphans, built wells in rural areas, fed the hungry. He found healing in serving others. Slowly, the pieces of his broken heart began to mend, not because someone else fixed him, but because he chose to rise. People began to recognize him, not for his pain, but for his strength. He inspired others who had been betrayed. He taught them that sometimes the best revenge is not anger, but peace. Final message. One evening, Zoya wrote him a letter. I now understand the kind of man you were, and I regret letting you go every single day. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I'm sorry, Arman. Truly. He never replied, but he read the letter and quietly whispered, I forgive you, but I will never return to the place where I lost myself loving you. Years had passed since Arman Khan had signed the divorce papers that ended his marriage with Zoya Sheikh. The pain, though faded, never truly disappeared. Some wounds don't bleed forever, but they leave behind a cold emptiness, a silence inside the soul that echoes when the world goes quiet. Arman had changed. He wasn't the soft-spoken, fragile man he once was. He had grown into someone stronger, wiser. The world had hardened him in some ways, but not in the ways that mattered. He still believed in goodness, but now he was careful with his trust. He still loved deeply, but now he gave his love only to those who truly valued it. He had moved to Turkey, working for an international NGO that rebuilt homes in war-affected villages. He no longer chased money or status. He chased meaning. And Zoya? Her world had slowly turned into dust. Zoya's spiral after Rian left her for a younger woman, Zoya tried to hold on to her pride. She moved into a small rented room, sold off her expensive belongings to survive, and began job hunting. But no one wanted to hire her. Her reputation had followed her like a shadow. People whispered behind her back. She left her husband for another man, and then he left her too. She tried to return to her parents' home, but they had shut their doors. We raised you better than this, her father had said. Even her closest friends distanced themselves. The same ones who once cheered her reckless love now watched her downfall in silence, too proud to help, too scared to be dragged down with her. Loneliness settled in like a sickness. Each night, Zoya would stare at the ceiling, replaying the moments where everything changed. She had once called Arman boring. Now she craved his boring. She missed his quiet love, his selfless care, the way he called her Zoya John in that soft village accent. One day, she opened her old email and saw their wedding photos. Arman standing shyly in a simple sherwani, eyes filled with hope, herself, smiling, unaware of the storm she was about to bring into his life. She wept that night, not out of sorrow, but out of guilt. The letter that never got a reply, she wrote. Again, Arman, I know I've lost every right to speak to you, but I need to tell you something. Not because I expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I see now. I see what I threw away. I see the man I failed. And I carry that every day. I hope you found happiness. Zoya. She never got a reply. And deep down, she didn't expect one. But one day, she received a small envelope in her mail. No return address. Inside was just one piece of paper. It read, I wish you healing, Zoya, but I have no space in my life for what broke me. Take care. A. She pressed the note to her chest and cried like she had never cried before, because she realized something terrible. She hadn't just lost a man. She had lost her home, her shelter, her protector. Arman's final piece. Meanwhile, in a small village, near Istanbul, Arman sat by a lake watching the sunset. Beside him was a little boy, an orphan he had adopted a year ago. The boy called him Baba. Arman smiled, brushed the child's hair back, and said, "You know, Beta, life doesn't always give second chances. So when you love someone, love them with truth. And if they leave, let them go without hate. That's how you stay human." He had found peace. Not because life was perfect, but because he had made peace with the imperfection. Zoya had faded into a distant corner of his memory. Not forgotten, just no longer important. The moral: Part 2 love is never the enemy. People's choices are. We often realize the value of someone after we've lost them beyond return. But some people, like Arman, rise from betrayal not with revenge, but with quiet strength and a heart too good for bitterness. Years had passed since Zoya last heard from Arman. That single letter, short, kind, but distant, was the last connection she had to the man she once called her husband. She never married again, not because she didn't have chances, but because no one ever loved her the way Arman had. Every smile reminded her of the one she lost. Every small gesture, every silence made her heart ache in ways she couldn't explain. She had built a quiet life, working as a school receptionist, living in a small flat, keeping to herself. She was no longer the Zoya of expensive handbags and late-night cafe selfies. Life had humbled her. She had aged faster than time. Grief has a way of carving years into the skin. But one day, fate crossed their paths again. A conference room. A familiar voice. Zoya was assigned to help coordinate a small charity conference in her city. A group from an international NGO was visiting to speak about post-war trauma care and rehabilitation. As she handed out name tags, a familiar name caught her eye: Arman Khan. Her hands froze. She looked up, heart pounding. And there he was, standing across the room, taller, broader, more confident than ever. His hair had grayed slightly at the temples, but his eyes still held the same depth. But this time they weren't looking for her. He was speaking to someone else, laughing, calm, collected, happy. She didn't know what hurt more, the fact that he looked so content, or that he didn't even recognize her at first glance. Their first conversation in years later that afternoon, he saw her. Their eyes met across the hallway. Time stopped. For a moment, the years melted away. Arman tilted his head slightly. Recognition, a brief flicker of memory in his eyes, but no anger, no warmth either, just peace. "Zoya," he said simply. She nodded. "Arman, you look different." "So do you," he replied. There was silence, that awkward, heavy silence that carries unsaid words. She tried to speak but couldn't. Arman broke the silence. "I hope you're doing well," Zoya forced a smile. "Trying, every day." "I'm glad," he said. Not cold, not warm, just honest. And then, as if that was all the universe allowed, he nodded and walked away. Zoya's breakdown that night. Zoya sat in her car outside the event venue, shaking. She whispered to herself, "He really doesn't feel anything anymore. Not even hate." And that's when it hit her. She hadn't just broken his heart. She had taught him how to stop feeling for her. She wept, not for him, but for the woman she used to be, and the man she would never get back. Arman's reflection, that. Same night, Arman sat by his hotel window sipping tea. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just sat with the memory of what used to be. He remembered the boy he was when he first loved her, naive, hopeful, vulnerable. But he didn't hate Zoya anymore. In fact, he didn't feel much at all, because time doesn't always erase love. But it does silence it. He had built a life that didn't need her in it, and that was his peace, the final lesson. Not every story ends with reconciliation. Some people come back into your life just to show you how far you've come without them. And sometimes seeing them again is the final chapter, not for them, but for your healing. The conference ended, and so did the momentary crossing of two lives that once were one. Zoya hadn't spoken to Arman again since that brief hallway encounter. She had thought she might. Maybe an apology, maybe a desperate plea to explain everything she hadn't said before. But the silence between them was louder than any apology could ever be. And Arman? He left the city 2 days later, quietly, without drama, without goodbyes. But this isn't a story about regret alone, it's a story about what comes after. Arman's new beginning 6. Months after the conference, Arman settled in Cappadocia, Turkey, a place of peace, of open skies and old cities. He had opened a small center for orphaned refugee children. Every day he would teach them, read them stories, play with them, laugh with them. And every night, when the world went quiet, he would write in his journal. One day, a little girl came up to him, barefoot, messy-haired, innocent-eyed. She clutched his finger and said, "Can I call you Baba?" And for the first time in years, Arman felt something crack inside. Not pain, not grief, but love. He adopted her, named her Ayla. She became the light he didn't know he still had room for. He taught her the meaning of respect, honesty, and love, not just the romantic kind, but the kind that heals the soul. Arman never remarried, not because he didn't believe in love anymore, but because his heart had already lived a full story. And sometimes, peace is better than passion. Zoya's slow redemption, Zoya, on the other hand, had begun her own quiet redemption. She never chased Arman again. She didn't try to write, call, or find him online. Instead, she turned inward. She started volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping broken women piece themselves back together because she knew what it felt like to be broken and to have no one to blame but yourself. Over time, she became someone people could trust, a listener, a mentor, a silent protector of those learning from pain. It didn't fix her past, but it gave her purpose. One evening, while organizing old photos in the shelter storage room, she came across a picture of a couple during a charity event. The man was smiling, holding a small child. It was Arman, with Ayla, his daughter. She stared at the photo for a long time, and for the first time in years, her tears didn't come from guilt. They came from gratitude. Because in some twisted, painful, yet beautiful way, he had found his light again, even if it wasn't with her. Letter she never sent months later, Zoya wrote one final letter. Not to send, just to let it out. Dear Arman, I never deserved your love, but I needed it more than I ever knew. You were the softest part of my life, and I broke you with my own hands. But I see now that maybe you were never meant to stay with me. Maybe you were just a blessing that came to teach me the hardest lesson. Not all love stories are meant to end in forever. Some just end in growth. I hope your daughter sees in you what I failed to see. I hope she becomes everything we could never be. And if you ever think of me, I hope you remember me as someone who once smiled beside you, even if only briefly. Zoya. She folded the letter and tucked it into her journal. That night, she slept peacefully, not because everything was right, but because she finally accepted what couldn't be rewritten. Years later, a final glimpse, 10 years had passed. Ayla, now a teenager, was giving a speech at a charity gala hosted in Istanbul. Arman sat in the front row, proud, smiling. She spoke about her father, how he saved her, raised her, loved her without limits. In the back of the room, hidden in the crowd, an older woman watched silently. Zoya. She didn't try to meet him. She didn't need to. She saw him smile. She saw him laugh. She saw that he was happy, and for her, that was enough. She stepped out of the hall quietly, leaving behind no trace. The final line's love doesn't always return to the same doorstep it left. Sometimes it takes a long road, through heartbreak and solitude, through fire and forgiveness, to arrive at its final form, peace. Arman forgave not because he forgot, but because he chose freedom over bitterness. Zoya learned that regret is heavy, but growth is possible, even for the most broken. And in the end, they both lived, not together, but fully.